Hey guys, my name is Ali and I'm a data analytics manager working in Oslo, Norway. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I learned data analytics, and we're going to look at how I started out, a little bit about how I got into the technology that I did, a little bit about my journey, how I consider myself to be quite lucky, and then I'm going to touch on how I actually learned and applied as I went, and then I'm going to end it up with some important notes that I think you should also know about. So if we start out in the beginning, I started out as an account manager, and I did that at a company called Qlik, which is a software vendor, and they offer a technology called QlikView, and today something newer which is called QlikSense. And starting out, I was working with sales, and it was mainly software sales, and every time I had a meeting, I noticed that someone would join me on a call, and that would be a technical pre-sales. And as time went by, I thought that seemed like a really fun role, because first of all, you had to understand the technical parts of the software, and you also had to understand the business needs. So there's one person who looks after licensing and trying to discover what the need is of the company, which is the salesperson, and then there's a technical pre-sales whose job it is to understand how do we solve this technically and create a solution that suits this company well. So after a while, I thought to myself, I want to become a technical pre-sales, but how do I go from a soft skills based role to a more technical role? And I thought about it. I wasn't really sure. Was I going to change company? I tried to look within Qlik, were there possibilities to start out, to move over. And there were some possibilities, but I could tell that this was going to take time and it was going to be a challenge. It wasn't just A to B move, because I had to pick up some skills along the way. Now, so back then, this was in 2015, Qlik was still a leader in the Gartner quadrant, which is a report that comes out every year who kind of places different softwares in different quadrants. You can be a challenger, you can be a leader, niche player, or a visionary. And Qlik was a leader. And that was back in 2015, and that's when I really started out, and that's what I focused on then, Qlik, because I worked for them. It made the most sense. If we look at the same report today, you can see that Microsoft is definitely in the leader quadrant, which is why I focus on Power BI today. The point of showing you this is that time changes, and there's going to be new softwares tomorrow, there's going to be new technologies the day after that. Things are going to change all the time. So what has persisted from 2015 to 2021 is certain concepts that I've learned along the way, which has made it possible for me to understand how do I apply myself in different settings, and how do I focus on what is the most important, what is the essence of this, and that is how do I create business value. It is not which technology do I work with, it is how do I create business value. And that was something that I learned very, very early on, because I started out as sales, and my entire job was to understand, okay, what is this company trying to achieve? And that is really what was my focus in the beginning. And then as I understood that, I want to be a technical salesperson, I want to be pre-sales. And then I thought to myself, okay, now I really need to understand the technology also, so that I can also deliver technically. So it became kind of a journey from someone who was more business savvy to someone who wants to understand the technical aspect also. And over time, I worked with Qlik, I worked with Tableau, now I work with Microsoft. It just happens to be that it has turned out like that. And I think it's been great. I've learned so much from working with the different technologies. But what has persisted is the thought that I always think about how do I derive business value, and the tools are important to know. But what I'm really chasing is improvements, business value, and supporting, making good decisions based on data. So the first thing that I think made me quite lucky is that since I started out in a software company that delivered a business intelligence software, my choice for technology was quite short. I chose quite early, this is the technology that I want to learn, and from there I focused a lot on how do I practice this technology and how do I apply it. So instead of spending a lot of time figuring out which technology to choose, I chose pretty quickly, okay, this Qlik software, it can do the entire spectrum. It can visualize data, it can get it out of data sources, it can do data modeling, and you can use it with a lot of different types of sources. I don't need anything else. From now on, I know that this is what I want to use as this is my toolbox. Now I need to learn very well how do I apply this toolbox to different scenarios. So what I think happened today is that there are so many more technologies, there are so many more resources, there are so many more things you guys can look at, so that the time you guys spend making a choice on which technology you finally settle for and you say I'm going to focus on is a lot longer, which gives you less time to practice and apply yourself before it eventually gets a little bit tiring, because it takes time to learn something new. And that is where I think I was quite lucky. And I think part of that luck is pure ignorance. I just didn't know any better. I just knew that, I had a technology. I understood quite early this can do every single step in what I want to do within data analytics. Now I just need to start practice, apply. That is the next thing. So the second thing that made me quite lucky is that, just as I said, within data analytics, and this is very important, it is that I started out in data analytics. A lot of you guys are starting out as data analysts, and the difference is that my job, or where I started out, you need to understand the entire process from where data comes from the source, how it gets modeled, how it gets optimized for data analysis purposes, and then how it gets visualized and then given over to the end user. So I was quite lucky that since day one, I've been thinking about how do I get data out of the data sources the most efficient way and get it to the end users the most efficient way, automated so that they can do something. If you create a report, they can get the same report time over time without having to create unnecessary manual steps. And this is something that when I learned it, the Qlik stack can do all of this. It can get data out of data sources, it can transform it. The Qlik script is very, very similar to SQL, so I also learned that. So there was a lot of transferring knowledge from that. You can use the Qlik software to resemble. You can create a data warehouse only using Qlik technologies, and you can visualize it. And it was quite ahead of its time compared to where Power BI is today, and definitely way ahead of Tableau in terms of data transforming and loading and cleansing. But now other softwares have picked up and things have evened out more. But for me, to start out and learn this from day one has made it possible for me today to always think about, okay, I'm going to solve something for the end user. How do I solve it in a way so that if I do something that creates business value, how can I automate it? How can I make sure that it delivers consistent results? And how can I use it to enable other people so that I don't become this bottleneck of something really great? And it depends on when I can do it and how I do it, if it can deliver value. But because I understand this process so well, I know how to set it up so that it becomes an enablement process for a lot of other users. And that's why on my channel, I think that, I try to also tell you guys that learn a little bit of data modeling, because when you know a little bit of that, it's easy to talk to the data engineers who have a lot of this responsibility, and it's a lot easier to think in terms of automation. Because when you guys become data analysts, you guys are going to do some really cool stuff. You guys are going to create some really valuable reports and insights. And what's going to happen is you're going to create expectations in the business, and they're going to want to have more and more often, and every week or even every day. And then it depends if you understand this whole process, because that will determine what kind of decisions you take as you develop this, if it can be automated or not. If you're doing single deep dives into one specific scenario and you're only going to deliver results on that one time, then this is not as important. But usually if you create something that is valuable, you want to know how you can set it into system, and that is where the understanding of data modeling and ETL really comes into it. And I learned that from day one, so I was very lucky. So it was luck, it was pure luck in ignorance. I just didn't know any better, and I just thought that this seems great, and I'm just going to keep working on that. So what happened is that I kind of had two parallel tracks towards becoming a technical pre-sales. So I was working as an account manager, and daily I would think about, my job was to understand, okay, I need to understand the company, how can we sell this to them, what are their business needs? And while I was doing that, I was learning a lot about the fundamentals of data modeling, databases. I learned about ETL, extract, transform, load data, SQL, and data visualization. And as I was doing that, I would always think about, okay, now I learned this technical concept, how would I apply that in my job today? Or how would I use that as an argument when I'm trying to sell this software? Because that is what was happening. I was starting to think in terms of business. If you think that my right side of the brain was thinking business, my left side was starting to think a lot more technical. It was starting to bridge the gaps, or the kind of the two different worlds, as I was getting more technical. So continuously I would ask myself, okay, today I learned how to extract data. If I were to talk to them about how we can get data out of data sources, this is maybe how they should do it. Okay, so this is how you write a SQL statement like this. So okay, I know they need to get this data out, they need to combine it with this. Most likely they need to use these two tables. Or if I were to talk about visualization, I could talk about, you guys are trying to show how to track some data or follow some data, then I can say, yeah, with the Qlik software we can do it this way, or I can show different alternatives. I even learned how to build stuff on the fly for them to show them. So it really became kind of a continuous process that just fell down on my original track, which was account manager, and just made me more technical. And the whole purpose was to become a technical pre-sales at the end. So how I learned is that as an account manager in Qlik, there were of course material at Qlik, and I got my hands on some of the fundamental courses, and I did those on my free time. And this is before I even thought about going on YouTube. It's before I really started to think that there were people out there that was sharing this kind of knowledge. So what I did is I just picked up a lot of different books, and what was great about these books is that since Qlik, the software can handle the entire process. You can use Qlik to get data out of sources, you can use it to do ETL, you can use it to script data warehouses, you can script it to do data visualization. What happened is that the books that I would look for, they would be created in a way that the book was essentially a company, and you would go through chapter from chapter to chapter, and it would be a different scenario for each chapter. So chapter 8 might be sales analysis, chapter 9 might be retail analysis, chapter 10 might be something else, and then 11 is P&L and finance. And I would just find books that would focus on specific things, and I would just plow through those. So, and it wasn't really that much else that I had to that I could use at that time. But what was great is that I wasn't looking at a lot of other technologies. I was just focusing on the Qlik technology, because it could do so much of the data analytics aspect that I knew that as long as I'm working on this technology and it covers everything, then I might as well just keep practicing it. And let me show you guys an example of what I mean, because my favorite book was called Qlik View Your Business. So let me show you guys what this looks like, just give you guys a preview so you understand what I mean when I say that the book kind of follows a company and covers all the aspects that you want to know. And it's almost like each chapter is like a project which you guys are trying to create today for your portfolio. So if we click this one, you can see that we will come in, and this is the preview. You can see it's actually quite a hefty book. It's $72, but it was definitely worth it, because when I scroll down, let's see if I can find it. So you can see here, and I'll try to zoom in for you guys. Okay, so the resolution isn't the best, but you can see part 2, learning the core techniques, sales analysis, which is basically how you do the entire process for sales analysis in Qlik, starting to end. And it would cover the metrics, it would cover the ETL process, everything. And then if you go to the next chapter, you would see it says profitability analysis. And it's the same thing. You have to create the data model for it, you have to create the metrics, you have to you have to cleanse the data, you have to do everything to achieve profitability analysis. And then you have mastering advanced techniques, inventory analysis. So what was happening is that I was just picking up these different books that just had a lot of different scenarios, and I would just go through them, and I would plow through, and then I would do some of that, and then I would go and look at books that were just for scripting, some that were just for visualization. And as I've said before, because I was focusing a lot on one technology, there was a lot of overlap between this, and after a while I just got really good at solving more or less the entire data analytics cyclist using Qlik software, and that's kind of what took me into pre-sales. And from there I moved on to a lot of different types of roles, because another thing that was really important to me is that as I moved from different roles, like I started out with account manager, then I went into pre-sales, Then I became a consultant, BI consultant, senior BI consultant, lead consultant, and then more managerial roles, which I have now. What happened is that during my consulting years, and this is something that I think you guys should think about if you have ever thought about consulting versus going in-house, is that when you work as a consultant, you get exposed to a lot of very different scenarios. And that is something that is quite important, because within the area of data and analytics, you can solve scenarios in a lot of different ways. But if you work at one company for a very long time, the way they work there will often shape you quite a bit. So what happened is that as a pre-sales, what happens is that you're part of some sales cycles. You're part of trying to sell the software, but you are handling the technical side. And I could have, 2-3 different clients in 1 week, which means 2-3 different solutions in 1 week, which means 2-3 different set of stakeholders and 2-3 different set of possible ways of doing things. And what happened is that I just got so much different exposure for different ways of doing things that after a while you just iterate and you iterate and you iterate, and you really start to pick up on what works, what doesn't work, what concepts are really important, what is not so important, and you kind of peel away like the onion until you really get to that core of what you really need to be good at to make sure that you deliver business value, and also ensure that you don't spend too much time on stuff that doesn't really matter, but that is something that will come with time. And then after that, as I went more into consulting, because I stayed pre-sales actually almost all the way until I was a lead consultant and team lead. Until then, I combined these different roles with doing pre-sales. And I just had so many different projects and clients. And think about it, like in a Qlik project, a lot of your project is handling the entire cyclist. You're handling it from getting the data out of the sources, cleaning it, delivering visualization, and following up on that value. I had to do that every single time for almost every project, because those BI projects today has a lot more faster turnaround than what they used to. So I was exposed to a lot of really different scenarios, and I think that's something that you guys should think about when you're getting your first job, or your second or third, that you get a job at a place where you should think about, okay, am I going to be exposed to a lot of different scenarios, or am I going to be a small cog in a large machinery? Because you want to be exposed to a lot of different scenarios so that you can see the pros and cons of different situations also. And you don't want to be too shaped by one place, because if you ever were to move on or you want to learn something else, you might be so stuck in that way of working that you've just been really shaped by that. And I see that sometimes in applicants and other people who's been working with this for a long time. When they then get presented with a different scenario where they need to think in a totally different way, it can actually be quite difficult. So the exposure to a lot of new different scenarios is also something that has definitely helped me in terms of learning data analytics. Now, if you look at where I started to think more in the way of data analysis, has actually been the last, I would say, 3 years of my job career, and that is when I got more into the lead positions, because I had to be a lot more involved in delivering and then following up on the actual analysis, also how it was used in projects to perform analysis and do advisory on that. And as the head of data and insights, and as the group head of BI and data services, I still have to maintain sort of a enterprise point of view, but I get asked a lot more to take a look at processes, to take a look at data sets, to understand data sets, to see how we can work more efficiently, how we can get value out of this data, how can we solve this scenario in a different way. So I don't only have to do those one-off data analysis tasks sometimes, but I also have to think about data analysis in terms of the enterprise and how it flows, from the beginning to the end, and the whole automation of this process. So that is how I learned data analytics from beginning to the end, and where I am today, which is the group head of business intelligence and data services. I hope that maybe gives you guys some ideas maybe on how you guys can learn. And of course, things are very different for you guys right now from how it is when I started out in 2015. But I still think there are a couple ideas and thoughts that will still apply to you guys, even though the whole landscape of learning is a lot different today than what it was like back then when I started out. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos on data and analytics, then subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.